There are college football legends everyone remembers, and then there are legends history quietly shelves. Joe Hamilton belongs firmly in the second category. This is a quarterback who didn't just play the position, he mastered it. A college football Hall of Famer, a Davey O'Brien winner, a Heisman runner-up. The engine behind one of the most explosive offenses college football had ever seen. And yet, say his name today, and most fans hesitate. That hesitation is the story. Joe Hamilton wasn't built like the so-called prototype. He didn't fit the mold scouts were comfortable with. But every Saturday at Georgia Tech, he dismantled defenses, rewrote ACC record books, and led with intelligence, toughness, and confidence. When his dominance became undeniable, the conversation didn't shift to celebration. It shifted to excuses. How does a quarterback dominate an entire conference, finish second in the Heisman race, and still fade from the national memory? That's what we do here on Old School Sundays. We dig up the stories football for real football history. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Because today, we're uncovering how one of the greatest black quarterbacks in NCAA history became one of its most overlooked. Before the awards, before the records, before the Hall of Fame, Joe Hamilton was just a kid from Alvin, South Carolina, a town so small it barely showed up on road maps. Fewer than 1,000 people, no bright lights, no recruiting circus. Just backyard football, vacant lots, and a community where the game wasn't entertainment, it was life. Hamilton didn't look like a quarterback then. He was undersized, easy to overlook, the kind of kid most coaches quietly slid to receiver or running back. But one man saw something different. Kenneth Green, a middle school coach at Macedonia Middle, saw not just a player, but a mind. Calm, confident, commanding. When Green handed Hamilton the offense in 7th grade, he wasn't making a safe decision. He was making a rare one. From his very first game, Hamilton didn't just run plays, he ran the team. When communication broke down mid-game, the kid didn't panic. He reminded his coach of the no-huddle system they practiced. Numbers flashed from the sideline, plays got called, drives kept moving. In that moment, it was clear. This wasn't about size, this was about instinct. While outsiders whispered about what Hamilton lacked physically, the people who actually watched him play talked about poise, about vision, about how the huddle felt different when he stepped into it. Alvin, South Carolina had produced elite football talent before, but Hamilton stood out even there because he understood the game in a way that couldn't be taught. And that foundation mattered, because long before college defenses tested him, before scouts questioned him, and had already learned the hardest lesson a quarterback can learn. If you're going to survive in this game, you'd better be smart, tougher, and more prepared than anyone else. That mindset would follow him all the way to Atlanta, and soon, the rest of college football would have no choice but to notice. When Joe Hamilton arrived at Georgia Tech in 1996, he didn't walk into a ready-made spotlight, he walked into pressure. The ACC wasn't friendly to young quarterbacks, and it was even less forgiving to black quarterbacks who didn't look the part. But from the moment Hamilton stepped onto the field, it was clear the Yellow Jackets had something different. By his freshman season, Hamilton was already making noise. He earned 4 ACC Rookie of the Week awards and finished as the runner-up for ACC Rookie of the Year. Not because the system carried him, but because the offense worked when the ball was in his hands. He wasn't just completing passes, he was processing defenses, adjusting protections, and keeping Georgia Tech competitive every single week. As his role expanded, so did the production. Over 4 seasons as a starting quarterback, Hamilton became the most prolific offensive player the ACC had ever seen. By the time his college career ended, he held conference career records that still demanded attention. 10,640 yards of total offense, 65 touchdown passes, and 83 total touchdowns. Not for a season, for a career in a major conference. And this wasn't decision-making. What made it even more impressive was how he did it. Hamilton wasn't just throwing for numbers, he was moving chains with his legs, extending drives, and punishing defenses that underestimated him. By his senior year, Georgia Tech's offense revolved entirely around his ability to read, react, and create. Yet, even as the numbers piled up, the praise always came with conditions. Questions about arm strength, questions about size, questions that never seemed to match the film. Because while critics debated what Joe Hamilton supposedly couldn't do, he was busy doing something far more important. He was turning Georgia Tech into one of the most dangerous offenses in college football. And in 1999, that danger reached its peak. By 1999, Joe Hamilton wasn't just leading Georgia clicked. The instincts, the preparation, the confidence, the command, what had been building for 3 seasons finally exploded onto the national stage. Hamilton finished the season second in the nation in passing efficiency, posting a jaw-dropping rating of 175, a number that put him shoulder to shoulder with the best quarterbacks in the country. He completed 67% of his passes, throwing for 3,060 yards and 29 touchdowns, while protecting the football and controlling games from start to finish. This wasn't reckless offense, this was precision. And when defenses sold out to stop his arm, Hamilton burned them another way. He rushed for 734 yards and 6 touchdowns, finishing as Georgia Tech's second leading rusher, a workload almost unheard of for a quarterback who was also carving up teams through the air. His rushing total set an NCAA record for a 3,000-yard passer, quietly redefining what efficiency at the position could look like. That season, Georgia Tech making every adjustment came from his reads. Teammates didn't just trust him, they depended on him. He beat rivals, he delivered in big moments. He capped his career with another dramatic win over Georgia, this time a 51-48 overtime thriller, sealing his legacy on the field even if history wouldn't seal it in memory. By December, the accolades followed. Davey O'Brien Award winner, consensus All-American, Heisman Trophy runner-up. Only one black quarterback in the country was better in the eyes of voters. But even then, something felt off. Because as the praise poured in, a familiar undercurrent began to rise. One that about what he was doing on the field and turned into what he supposedly wasn't. Not tall enough, not built right, not pro-style. The same performance that elevated others suddenly came with disclaimers. At 5'10", Hamilton became a measurement before he was a player. Never mind that he was diagnosing defenses pre-snap. Never mind that he was checking into better plays and protecting his offense from bad looks. Those details didn't fit neatly into scouting shorthand. It was easier to reduce him to inches. Even inside Georgia Tech, the result wasn't a compromised quarterback, it was a smarter one. Hamilton became the rare signal caller who could take an offense out of trouble before trouble ever arrived. He recognized defensive fronts, he anticipated pressure, he changed plays at the line with confidence. By his senior season, Friedgen would later admit that there were almost no plays called where Hamilton didn't give the offense a chance to succeed. But outside the film room, none of that mattered as much as optics. The whisper campaign grew louder. The success was explained away. He was system-driven. He was creative but limited. He was praised with conditions. And this is by the time Joe Hamilton's college career ended, his resume was airtight. The film was undeniable, the awards were national. The leadership was proven, and yet, as the 2000 NFL Draft approached, it became clear that the league was evaluating him through a completely different lens. Teams didn't debate his production, they debated whether it counted. The same qualities that made him lethal in college were suddenly reframed as concerns. Too small, too unconventional, too dependent on movement. The conversation wasn't about how often he won. A quarterback who had just finished as the Heisman runner-up was now labeled a developmental long shot. Not a future, not a plan, a lottery ticket. In Tampa Bay, opportunity never followed. Over 3 seasons, Hamilton saw the field for just 4 total offensive snaps in a single regular season game. That was it. No extended evaluation, no chance to settle in, no real runway to prove that the instincts, intelligence, and composure that defined his college career could translate. Ironically, he still walked away with the Super Bowl ring after Tampa Bay's victory in Super Bowl 37, a symbol of success that masked how little he had actually been allowed to contribute. When he was finally sent to NFL Europe, something familiar happened. Given real reps, Hamilton led the Frankfurt Galaxy to a 5-2 record before a torn ACL ended his season, and with it, another opportunity. For Joe Hamilton, the pattern was now clear. The game required thinking, timing, and leadership. He belonged. With the Orlando Predators, Hamilton became the full-time starter and immediately stabilized the franchise. Over 3 seasons, he compiled a 32-15 record as the starting quarterback, guiding the team to consistent contention. In 2006, he led Orlando all the way to Arena Bowl 20, coming within 1 game of history. A victory would have made him the first player ever to own both the Super Bowl ring and an Arena Bowl championship, a feat that would have permanently altered how his career was remembered. Even in this phase, adversity followed. Knee injuries limited games, seasons were interrupted, Opportunities came with expiration dates, and yet, the performance never dipped. Teammates trusted him, coaches leaned on him. The offense moved when he was under center. Still, when the 2006 season ended, the Predators released him. But this wasn't an ending, it was a pivot. Because Joe Hamilton was about to prove that his football intelligence with the next player whose story needs uncovering, and subscribe to the channel. Because legends don't disappear, they get erased. And here, we write them back into the record.